What's going on, team? Tegan, shout out to you. First show. Doing
Oh, and we
big.
can't hear
I like
him.
it.
Hi. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties. Blame Curtis.
All right, see, man, you got me up now.
Yeah, you're good.
I was all hyped up. I was just saying, Tegan, your first show. You got quite the guest lineup. I'm excited for you.
Well, thank you for being a part of it. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy, and you were probably pretty excited to continue this conversation from our Rider Nation call-in show Saturday night. We got some hot takes, Justin, regarding that scoop and score that came back on Devon Campbell. So what is your perspective on that call?
I did see one of the officials who was working that game on my plane ride back. Actually, I won't name who it was. And I noticed that he was looking at some game film. So that's how I was like, who is this in front of me? Literally the row in front of me watching the game film. It's got to be a coach or a referee, somebody of importance. And I straight up asked him, I said, what happened on that play? And you could tell he didn't want to give really any description because
I wonder
he
why.
might be quoted on it. So yeah, I totally understand that. But he essentially said that, they are trying to err on the side of player safety, and the crew thought that it was a touchdown. But as we've heard a bunch from people in Rider Nation, there was no, I don't think, on-field indication. Like, Dave, did you see any official raise their hands?
No official raised their hands at all on it. I thought it was a touchdown, though. I said he's in the end zone. Or close to.
It did seem like it was close upon review, but that was the explanation that I got for one of the officials who worked the game. And, I took this stance on the post-game show, and I'll say it again. It's unpopular, but TSN did a really good job of showing that there actually was a whistle that was blown.
I will say our poll right now at sportscage.com, do you think Devon Campbell's fumble recovery should have counted as a touchdown? Overwhelmingly, yes. It was clear and obvious Campbell had recovered the ball and scored a touchdown. That is 64.5% of the vote. Keeping in mind, yes, we do live in, Rider Nation, but no. The CFL Replay Center was there to make the right call, and they did 2.95%. Just goes to show.
One part of this that I'll add in is if there was an inadvertent whistle like TSN used on their broadcast, why wasn't the rest of the play blown dead? If there was one, if you're the officials, wouldn't you want to try to cover up your boo-boo a little more and blow a bunch of whistles and stop Devon Campbell from getting to the end zone, because then you don't have the wrath of Rider Nation coming at you?
Well, and again, Tavon talked about it with Tegan on the field, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, why are they still chasing me? Because Nathan Rourke chased him the length of the field. He almost got him, too, so it wasn't like Rourke let up because he thought he heard a whistle, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of opinions on this one, and we'd love to hear from you. So give us a call, 306-936-6262, or text us throughout the show. You'll have a chance to win some of those West Final tickets. But now we should talk about the matter at hand here, Justin. Big announcement, 2027 Grey Cup coming back to Saskatchewan, second time in 5 years. So that's a pretty big deal. Did you have any indication that it would be coming back to Saskatchewan, or were there some other rumors milling about?
There was some talk about it going to Edmonton, and then when I dug into it a little more, it did not sound like that proposal actually got tabled. So when you run through the rest of the other possible teams that could have gone to, it didn't really make sense. Like, it's not going to go to Winnipeg 2 times in 3 years, right? It was just in BC, and Calgary has it in 2026. Ottawa's stadium and their renovations won't be ready, and I don't believe they submitted a bid. So really, when you looked at it, Saskatchewan became a favorite from that standpoint. So I know to some people it seemed like it was early for it to go back to the Heartland, but I think when you consider Mosaic Stadium still in its prime, I think the best stadium and facility that there is in the Canadian Football League, you might as well make use of it.
And they're going to make a killing selling a bunch of mittens and toques, that's for sure.
But are you surprised at all? And BMO Field has hosted a Grey Cup before. Do the Argonauts want to host a Grey Cup anytime soon? I get it. They got the World Cup this coming summer, and maybe that dictates where some of the money is spent. But wouldn't Toronto want this?
You would think that any city would want it. But to your point about BMO Field, the last time that it was there, a lot of people locally talked about how the CFL and the Argos were trying to paper the house. And if I remember, I think that was the infamous pizza giveaway where I don't want to mess up the details here, but essentially you could get some free tickets for buying a decent amount of pizza from Pizza. So I think that when you look at out west, we know that the majority, if not all of the markets out there are more rabid fan bases for the CFL than Toronto is at the moment right now. Definitely from an economic standpoint, you want to have it in your city. And I think that Toronto probably could have marketed it, especially with increased alignment at MLSE now that Ed Rogers essentially owns, I think it's like 3/4 of MLSE at this point, that you could get some synergies there and fill the building. So I think that's a valid point, Dave. Is like some of the teams in the East, well, would they have wanted it? Hamilton's had two, and I think it was a 3-year span recently, but that was because the pandemic messed some things up. And then you look at Montreal, and their stadium's just not big enough right now. All the Grey Cups that have been there were at Olympic Stadium. So I think that's a fair point. It's like, wouldn't Toronto want to have it? And then also, wouldn't they want to try to recoup some of the revenue because they're going to play 3 road home games next year?
Well, if you ask Jim, our
Jim's
caller that we
yeah.
had on there, he is totally fine with us not having a Grey Cup in Toronto.
Oh boy. Okay, so can I go away from the Grey Cup for just a second? And Justin, you were on top of it when it came to what was going to be happening with the Ottawa Red Blacks and the changes there. And of course, Bob Dice has been relieved as head coach. But aren't the Red Blacks kind of in a little bit of trouble right now because next year they'll have to pay for 2 head coaches, and there's that coach's salary cap, right?
There is. There's actually a amnesty clause that you can have where you can pay that contract and it not be counted towards your football operations cap. There's some other details that go along with it, but you're right. Depending how they want to go about the financial situation there, it could be a little tricky. I don't necessarily think that that's going to stop OSEG or general manager Sean Burke from going out and trying to hire who they believe is the best candidate. But, I think something that should be said, Rider Nation's loving the guy right now, and rightfully so, is Corey Mace, because before he interviewed with the Riders and ultimately took the job leading into the 2024 CFL season, he interviewed in Ottawa the year before. So there was a chance that Ottawa could have gotten Corey Mace. Now, at that time, it was a difficult decision because Bob Dice had took over as the interim head coach, and it seemed like the players were behind him. And then we got to remember that it wasn't too long ago, like in 2024, Bob Dice led that team to the playoffs. So to me, that's the one big tie that sticks out for Rider Nation is you're lucky that the Ottawa Red Blacks passed up on Corey Mace and he ended up in the Heartland.
Yeah, Red Blacks fans are certainly kicking themselves now, hey? Whew. Let's talk a little bit about the road to this Grey Cup now. I want to get your take on, now that, the semis are set, what do you like in these matchups? Let's start with Winnipeg-Montreal. How do you think Winnipeg is going to fare?
I think it's going to be tough. And Davis Alexander's record has been proven that when he's healthy, starts a game and finishes it, he doesn't lose. And you're going into Montreal, and I know they've supposedly banned the air horns there, but Dave can attest it's still noisy there. They bring noisemakers, don't they, Dave?
Yeah, you do. Absolutely. Bang on.
So it's going to be loud and proud. All the Quebecers will be there supporting their team. And I think Montreal's a bit of a buzzsaw, especially on defense, that could be really difficult for this Winnipeg offense that's been out of sorts, especially the last couple weeks, and even against the Saskatchewan Roughriders in week 20. Zach Collaros was running around for his life there. So I like the Alouettes at home. I do think there's a path to victory for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and it involves a steady, consistent dose of Brady Oliveira, who, by the way, is still the reigning MOC and MOP.
Now let's shift things over to the West. We now know that the Riders have this bye week, obviously, and they're awaiting their next opponent in Calgary, BC. Who do you think they're going to fare best against after we kind of talk about who you think is going to win this one?
I think actually from the recent games, it's Saskatchewan will match up well against both those teams. I know some people in Rider Nation might be scared of Calgary because of what happened earlier in the season, but it's not the same football team. I don't think Vernon Adams Jr. is playing at the same level that he was earlier in the year. And the injury to Folarin Ormalade, the star defensive end for the Stamps, he's out for the season, suffered an Achilles injury. is really a big one for this football team. He saw a lot of double teams. He allowed Jalen Hutchings in the middle to get more favorable matchups. But now teams can focus on Hutchings. And yes, they went out and got Lorenzo Malden, but he is, with all due respect, not in the same echelon as Folarin or Malade. So I think the Riders could fare well against Calgary. And then we saw the fits that Saskatchewan was able to give BC last week at Mosaic Stadium, with Trevor Harris only playing a quarter and a half. And Trevor Harris was carving that defense, like 10 of 11 for 112 yards, 3 drives, points came on all of them, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, looked really good against that defense that started off slow for BC, picked up, I would say, in the second part of the season, but it seemed like Harris had their number. So I think from an overall standpoint, any time that you have the best player in the Canadian Football League coming into your building, I think that's going to give you the most trouble. And in my opinion, that person this year is Nathan Rourke. But Nelson Lacombo showed in that game at Mosaic Stadium on Saturday night that he's got a pretty good read on Rourke and those vertical seams that Luke Mullender talked about. So I think BC's going to have different elements definitely in the game plan. But I think either one matches up decently well for the Riders.
Hypothetically, let's say it is Calgary. How much of this would be a mental hurdle for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, just solely based on the fact that during the regular season, they did not beat the Stamps?
I think there's a bit of a mental hurdle there, but those games were actually like earlier in the season. I think both those games were in the summertime, wasn't even down the back stretch here. So I think Corey Mace has this team so locked in on going 1-0 that they'll watch some of that tape from earlier in the season perhaps and try to learn from it. But they're going to be looking at the last handful of games for the trends of what this team is, like I talked about, without some of the key contributors in Folarin or Malade on defense. So I think they'll be able to get over that mental hurdle.
So, of course, Justin Dunk is our guest on the Western Pizza guest hotline. If you want to give us a shout, Justin joins us, of course, from 3 Down Nation, but he's also on the Rider Broadcast Network pre-game, post-game. We take your calls. And, of course, that Tavon Campbell scoop and score that was called back was a massive topic of conversation. So we'd love to hear from you. 306-936-6262 or 1-866-767-0620. You call, you text, you might go to the West Final for free. I'm curious, though, have you heard any more about grading the command center when situations like this happen? Can you take a little peek behind the curtain there for us, or have you heard anything new?
The officials do get graded. So then by extension, and this is just my speculation, I would imagine the command center is graded as well. And that ultimately determines playoff assignments and Grey Cup assignments. Like, these officials don't want to be out here blowing calls. I know that might be breaking news to Rider Nation, but they're trying their best to get it right. So I think sort of the other part of this conversation is, how can the officials in the Canadian Football League be more supported? Like we talked about it on the 3 Down Nation podcast. Do you make your officials more well compensated, let's say? I don't think you're ever going to get to the point where you have full-time officials, but how can we help them out? I think this is a bit of a one-off where there was an inadvertent whistle, but there is definitely a grading system, and ultimately the more games that you work, the more money that you make. So these guys want to be part of the playoffs and the Grey Cup as an officiating crew.
Just to build on that, now I don't have the ins and outs in the Canadian Football League, but if you go to the youth sports level, the officials there, and I know there's a bunch of support at the local branch level, so that would be the Saskatchewan Football Officials Association. The amount of scrutiny that they undergo, it's intense. Like, it is followed up with video work, and it can come down to a blown spot, and not of the football, of where your placement is on the field. That can determine in youth sports whether or not you work a playoff game or not, or how many you get. So I'd assume that in the CFL, it would be the same, but there has to be a conversation. And I would assume that's one of the things, Justin, you know better. Would Stu Johnston have that on his to-do list in this offseason to examine where the replay center fits in? Like, they changed the name of it halfway through the year.
True. Stuart Johnston has said everything's on the table. I think a lot of that job would go to Darren Hackwood, who is in the league office and oversees the officials, and ask the question that Stuart Johnston has gone around asking: just because we did it this way in the past, does it make sense to do it this way in the future? and how can we improve? And I think one of the things to improve for the command center is perhaps being able to speed up the process. I don't know the entire process behind the scenes, but we've seen it a number of times watching, for example, the Blue Jays in these playoffs, right? You get a finite amount of time where you can challenge a play, but also the command center, for lack of a better term, whatever it's called in the MLB, I would imagine, and I think in the NFL, they've gotten this down really well. They're watching the play like already. They're dissecting it to make sure they didn't miss anything egregious. I think the command center in the CFL tries to do the same thing, but I would imagine that Stuart Johnston is going to look at, just like everything else in the CFL, the officiating with a magnifying glass in the offseason.
We did get a text from Daryl here at 306-936-6262. Curious to see, can the command center overrule a whistle on the field?
That you can't. It's in the rule book. If there's a whistle and there's a recovery, exactly how it was explained during the game, I know Rider Nation doesn't want to hear it, then that's what happens. It's not ideal, but that's the rule.
A rule's a rule.
Anybody else catch Tavon Campbell in the post-game show when he talked about what he was doing during the bye week and said that they were going to watch 3 teams film this week? So the two teams in the West semifinal and whoever they think is coming out of the East. I thought that was pretty under the radar by Tavon to slip that in.
I caught that too, and I thought, he's thinking ahead already? Like, Corey Mace usually has these guys dialed in for going to 1-0, but perhaps the Riders think that Hamilton's going to make the playoffs, or make the Grey Cup. I guess we'll see. Really quick before, because I'm being told that we have to take a break here, but I want to get your take on who you think is going to win in LA tonight. Do you think it's the Dodgers, Jays? You got Glasnow and Scherzer. I got to go with Mad Max. I think he wants this so bad. He had his Scherzer moment, and then Trevor Harris and Corey May said that they had their Scherzer moment earlier in the season, that this guy is just about greatness. And what I liked about it was the players talking about them being scared to even go talk to Mad Max on his day of a start. I don't know if that's the best thing, but to me, it tells you that this guy is so locked in on being great that in this moment and the history that he can make, I think it's the 4th team that he started a World Series game with. He understands the magnitude of the moment. He's pitched in that park before. So I got a good feeling about Scherzer and the Jays.
All right. That's a good answer, especially here, in Rider Nation and in Canada. I think everyone's going to be watching that game tonight. So enjoy the game, and
no whistles with the Blue Jays tonight, so don't worry about that. We're all covered.
Oh, man. Something's going to happen now that you said it. You jinxed it, Dave. Yeah. Thanks for that. No, Justin Dunk from 3 Down Nation. Always appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tegan. Keep crushing it.
All right. Appreciate it, buddy.